A new era is upon us, and Tangent is back with a new limited series hosted by venture capitalist Jeffrey Berman and me, PropTech entrepreneur Edward Cohen. Tangent unites PropTech founders, real estate investors, urban leaders, and passionate creators who are improving our cities and quality of life. Join us to learn how we can solve the present-day challenges in our communities with innovative technology and greater collaboration. We'll examine diverse issues through interviews and conversations where going off on a tangent is encouraged, hoping to help you become a more nuanced thinker and find comfort in data. If you are working on a PropTech solution, a nonprofit, or a small business that makes our cities better and would like your mission featured on our features segment, please email us at tangentcommunity@gmail.com. Hi, welcome to Tangent. I'm Edward Cohen.
I'm Jeffrey Berman, a general partner at Camber Creek, and I am the wonderful co-host of the Tangent podcast that Edward has created.
Today on Tangent, we have Nick Romito, founder and CEO at VTS, commercial real estate's leading leasing and asset management platform. Hi, Nick. Where does this podcast find you?
Hey, everybody. I am at our headquarters here in New York City. Thanks for having me.
Best city in the world, as some say, at least in the US. Nick, under your leadership, VTS has grown to more than 60% of Class A office space in the US, and over 12 billion square feet of office, retail, and industrial is managed through your platform globally. You have an unrivaled perspective to talk to us about the state of the office market and what's going on, so let it roll.
Yeah. Everybody reads the headlines, right? I don't think it's news to anybody that most owners of office are in some pretty murky waters. I don't know if there's an end in sight in some regards, because it's kind of multiple things coming together at once that are this perfect storm. On one hand, you still kind of have this COVID, I don't want to call it a hangover, but this change that has happened about how we use offices, right? I think everybody thought early on that a year ago buildings would be totally full, and they're just not. I think probably in the best buildings, you're seeing maybe 70%, 3 days a week. The average is probably more like 50, and that's in some markets, not others. That's kind of one data point. Another data point is just the overall demand for office space, just in the top 8 cities in the US, is down about 21% year over year, and still 46% off of pre-COVID levels, meaning there are 46% less people out in the market trying to find new office space than there were pre-COVID across those major markets. And it's going the wrong way, right? We're down from last year. I think you combine those two things, and right, what that means is, revenue effectively in those markets, or the whole US, is shrinking. Well, you also have debt maturing, right? Revenue covers debt. So it's kind of this weird storm where you're seeing the headlines of major institutional owners giving back buildings. I've been doing this 20 years. I think maybe you saw some of that in kind of 08, but I don't remember it at the level or the names that I'm seeing. And these guys are all really smart, so I'm sure that there's a mathematical reason why for some of these buildings it just doesn't make sense. You're never gonna hit whatever your pro forma was 5 years ago. But it doesn't change the fact that office is in a really interesting place. I think even with that said, most of the larger office owners are still bullish office. They're just trying to figure out what parts of their portfolio will make sense, because they know that not all of it will, right? There is a subset of office now that they know is going to be really challenged for the more foreseeable future, but there are also other parts that are going to be successful. So if I take, for example, just take the top 5% of the trophy assets in New York, right? Well, that category, that segment, is seeing actual rent growth of about 20% year over year. So that's a category that's growing rent, right? And so what does that tell you? I think it tells you that tenants, are excited about office if that office probably looks pretty special, right? It is highly amenitized. It is offering their teams things that they cannot get at home, and it's appealing enough where I'd rather be there than at my house.
I don't want to interrupt the flow, but you've said a lot that I think our audience would want to unpack. So before we get to the rest of it, and I have a feeling you're going to end up on financing and interest rates. So the last point you made first, you were talking about the creme de la creme of buildings, specifically New York. So what percentage of the office buildings would you characterize or classify as creme de la creme? And to be even more specific, would you say it's only buildings like the new vintages from Hudson Yards, One Vanderbilt, et cetera? Or do you think there are legacy buildings, let's say like the Empire State Building that ESRT owns and maintains really well? How do you think about that?
It's a good question. I think, well, it's kind of a loaded question because even within those buildings you mentioned, right? The top of those buildings versus the bottom of those buildings is very different. So that's the tricky part about the office sector is you could have such a different comp from the base of the building to the tower floors from both a rent perspective, but also just maybe an overall appeal. And so my comment was really referring to the One Madisons of the world, right? Like the kind of newer vintage buildings that you're seeing the $200 rents right at tower floors. Now that being said, right, you've got buildings like Empire State where they are doing some unbelievable work to almost re-amenitize these buildings that creates a totally different experience. And so I'm actually excited to see the work that they're doing come to life and how the overall kind of tenant environment reacts to it, because I think it'll be positive.
So that doesn't really give us an answer. I want to understand from like an order of magnitude.
It's a small percentage. You're talking, call it 5%, right? So you've got Class B, Class A trophy, right? So maybe it's 5% of the total market, maybe 10 in some markets, but the vast majority of places like New York is commodity space, right? It's side street buildings where owners are more cash flow driven and they're not going to spend the money.
So what you're saying is for the marquee properties and the groups that own them. So I'm thinking like Boston Properties, right? That has just a magnificent portfolio, or the former Columbia Property Trust, also one of our LPs. They had a great portfolio. Those folks, their buildings probably doing quite a bit better, maybe experiencing some rent growth. The rest, what you're saying is the data is telling you office is, would you call it, are the rents collapsing? Are they shrinking? And the corollary question to that is where the first point you made about people not showing up in the office, that's more of a management driven thing now. You're seeing the financial world, Wall Street, say enough is enough. Come back to the office. Like what do you guys? How do you think you're going to advance in your career if you're sitting at home? Ken Griffin, who is arguably the most successful hedge funder on the planet right now, he said it best. He said, the reason that we had this banner year, 16 billion in profits, which I think was more than half of the profits for the entire industry, he said, everyone's showing up to work. Everyone's in the office. So what I'm trying to understand is the second a function of the first? Are the buildings, is the office market suffering because the management teams of the tenants aren't saying, hey guys, hey, come back to work? Do you think that's what's happening? Is there some nuance there?
I'll answer that in two ways. I think one, to your original question on just the owners that are probably set up for more success are, I think it's the folks who have the Salesforce towers, the One Madisons, the really beautiful amenitized buildings that just candidly lend themselves more to how people are going to probably work moving forward, even if they are in the office, right? They're going to work different in different places in the building. They want to have breakout. It's a little bit different. It doesn't mean that commodity space can't make investments to make that work, because they totally can. The problem is capital is very expensive right now, right? So it's not easy. It's easy to say to do that, but it's not easy to actually get the capital to do it. I think to your second question on like whose fault is it, which is kind of the question, it's like, is it the company's fault because you guys are saying work from home, you lazy bastards?
Whoa! I did not say that.
These are your words, not mine. So I think, listen, I'm a CEO of a 600-person company, right? And our largest percentage of people are engineers and product people. And so I can tell you that it has been a market where all of the leverage has been the employee, right? In a competitive market we've had for the past 7 years, right? For those folks who are such valuable assets, right? They're your builders. You really couldn't argue with what they wanted from a work perspective. And you did that knowing that, listen, they're largely heads down writing code. So like, you want them in a space where they are going to be productive. And if they're saying it's at home, then it's hard to argue with that because you don't write code. So that's been the larger sense. I will say for us, the other 2/3 of our business, right, who are business people, account managers, marketing, we've been largely in for like 2 years, at least 2 to 3 days a week. And like, I don't have a mandate. I said, you decide what you want to do, because it was still kind of a weird world and I was figuring out what we should do. But on their own accord said, dude, culture, we're here for the culture. Yeah, the opportunity, but like the culture drives that. And so it wasn't up until literally a few months ago that I said, okay, I'm picking a date, which is March 6th. By March 6th, we're in the office. And if you don't want to be here, I love you, I'm going to miss you. But that is what we did. Listen, I think I'm someone who now believes that, listen, maybe one day at home a week to do heads down work, one-on-ones, like it's probably valuable, good time. But there is no world where we are more efficient from home. Like, you mentioned Ken Griffey. I've asked pretty much all of my venture capital investors, who are your most successful companies? Pretty much every time it is a company who is either in the office 5 days a week or 3 or 4. The data's there. No one's collecting it and making a big deal out of it, but I promise you the data's there.
Well, and it's just a function of what humans want as well. I miss interacting with my partners and my team on a daily basis in person. And that there, to your point, the culture 1 + 1 does equal 3 oftentimes. You just have, in fact, every time when you're building a great company. I mean, I would much rather be doing this in person because we'd be able to feed off our energy more so than we can staring through this lovely Riverside app. It's just different. So getting back to the original question, so you've got a confluence of factors that's hitting office. Were you going to mention the fact that there is a massive amount of financings, debt, leverage coming due over the short term with much higher interest rates? And now all of a sudden buildings that might have made sense 3 or 4 years ago, even 2 years ago, no longer make sense.
Yeah, that is the case. And I think an interesting data point, if you look at, there's not a lot of buildings. The capital markets are down by like some massive percentage year over year. There's not a lot of buildings kind of trading hands. You're reading about things being given back or potentially given back. But if you look at a lot of the deals that have actually happened, they're not the big institutions, right? They're like, I don't want to call them mom and pops, but they're family offices who have cash to go and buy assets, right? They're not 100% relying on the banks to do it at some crazy rate. So I don't know, it's probably not a great data point because you want to see capital moving, but it's going to create a really interesting addition to the office environment for the next 12 to, I'm guessing, at least 12 months that we haven't seen in a long time.
Super interesting stuff, and I'd personally love to see some data about companies that are the same size or within the same industry, and how are they faring between each other? How is their productivity up or down? How are their revenues up or down? Based on if they're coming to the office or they're hybrid or whatnot. I think that will be the definitive data, but some super interesting data points, and undeniably, collaboration face to face. It's what drives us as humans. We're social creatures. Real estate investors keep collecting more and more data than we know what to do with. This is why accessing data instantly wherever you are and utilizing it effectively have become core advantages to investing and managing real estate. Raccord provides automated direct connectivity into your firm's internal data. Raccord's technology distills complex Excel models and integrates disparate data sources into one location, allowing for real-time acquisitions and portfolio analysis. Raccord provides a secure, investor-friendly mobile app that brings together all your business intelligence, creating one source of truth for investment teams to support data-driven decisions. Complex data models made simple at your fingerprints. That's right, Raccord is changing how commercial real estate players collect, access, and utilize data. With teams working asynchronously and across geographies and deals getting done at a faster pace, Having direct connectivity to your data on the road can save critical time and improve execution accuracy. Real estate investors use Raccord to have a single source of truth for your business intelligence to better understand your assets and the markets you're investing in. To learn more, please visit Raccord.com. That's RACCORD.com. Now, in terms of like why should we all care? I mean, if we're in commercial real estate, if we were working in office, or if you work at an office, we by definition we should care about what happens in the office market. But many downtowns, many cities, are struggling to really bring people back, and that means that empty offices will have knock-on effects not only on the office space, but also on urban retail services and public transport. So we're talking about cities' revenues here that they will need to replace somehow. So we should really all be caring about what's happening. Office market could be the canary in the coal mine for many cities around the world. But there's a lot of talk about paradigm shift, right? How will commercial real estate evolve, going forward? We're not going to be operating, managing, investing, using the buildings the same way as we have been. So yeah, talk about, Nick, what do you foresee, changing let's talk about first the property owners, the operators, the developers' perspectives. How are they planning on signing new tenants to their offices? How are they planning to upgrading or repositioning their assets to keep them valuable and resilient for years to come?
So I think the shift itself is not just the buildings, it's the teams that run them, right? If the team running the building doesn't believe that the expectations of the customer have changed, do whatever you want to that building, it's not going to really do all that much, right? So I think there's a couple of things that we've seen happen over the past, even really year. One, you've traditionally had these two teams who run a building, right? Or maybe three. You've got leasing, which is either a third party or in-house. You have an asset manager who's kind of the CEO of that asset. And you have property management, right? That's the team. Those teams don't talk all that much, right? When there's a meaningful update about a lease renewal, but like day to day, they run their own separate channels. The new world, those three people consider themselves probably more of a single team who is there to better service the customers in that building however they can, right? Property management's job goes from triaging a work order to what can I do for you today, Mr. Romito? How's your day going? It feels more like a hospitality-esque environment than it does, just Frank's here to fix the light bulbs. Because again, if you were going to get somebody off their couch, that experience better be better. And so for us, we started by thinking, okay, we started to see some customers make that transition. And it's funny, CBRE, we just did a financing with them a few months ago, and we were in a pretty unique spot where we had a couple options, and their view of the world was like, we as the largest service provider in the world have to make that shift. And I was like, oh wow, these guys, they actually get it. Like that is a meaningful thing to say for a $30 billion company at the CEO down. And so that excited us. And when you see how it's playing out, they're saying that message. You've got some of the larger owners themselves who are now hiring roles that didn't exist a year ago, right? They might have a property manager. They also have a head of community. What does that mean? It means it's that person's job to engage with the customers, the tenants in the building every single week, right? It's a form of communication. So I think it starts with the team, and then it's what's possible in the building, right? You've got to create some kind of experience that is different from just, hey, your workplace is the 14th floor. That is not true anymore. Your workplace, if you want to get somebody back, their workplace is probably all 4 buildings you own. It's the amenities in this building, it's their office in that building, it's the restaurant in this one, and you've got to activate every part of that campus for that person to want to be there. So it's, I think probably the biggest change, and then I'll stop talking, is that the way we define workplace is different, right? It is not just your floor and your desk, it's every part of that building and probably your portfolio.
But you know what's interesting? One of our LPs owns, I don't want to call them lifestyle office parks, but that's really in essence what they are. And this is not a new idea. It's been around for like 40 years. And the locations are suburban. So if you think back if you take a really long view of the office sector and you think about how obviously it started in densely populated areas, cities, and then you started to have suburbs and exurbs and office these 1, 2, and 3 story office buildings that then some of them became flex buildings. It feels like we're just coming back around to that, you know what? I don't need to be in a city anymore. I can be in a suburb. I can work in a place where there's a restaurant and a lounge and ample parking, a bedroom community. Maybe I'll commute to the city 1 or 2 times a week. That's what it feels like. I know that's not exactly what's happening because I tend to agree with you because we talk to our LPs constantly, obviously, and the folk that own those Class A buildings, they're thinking exactly the way you just said, which is, hey, we're bringing hospitality, this hospitality element into the workplace because we've been blending that together for the past 2 years as a function of work from home. We want people to feel like if they want to work out of a cubicle, they can do it. If they want to work out of a place with some couches and ambient music, they can do it. But I don't necessarily think, and maybe I'm wrong because this is just anecdotal what I'm saying, but I don't necessarily think this is a paradigm shift. It might just be a return to the same impulse that drove the suburban explosion. I mean, what do you say about that, Nick?
I think it's probably pretty accurate. I think, listen, if history's told us anything, it's like these cycles always repeat themselves, maybe in some different shape or form. I mean, WeWork's a good example of that. WeWork wasn't the first flex provider. They did it a little bit differently. But if you look about what made them successful, again, you can argue their business model doesn't really work and companies struggling, but like you can't deny the demand or the number of users that they were able to grab. And their biggest advantage was their scale, right? You had a campus of 55 countries to work out of, whatever the number was. Like in my mind, like that's what made that so intriguing for people was the scale, right? So like, take that and shrink it, right? If I live in New York City and I can have a mini version of that scale because I want to work different ways, different days, and so does my team, I'll take that option over you're going to work on the 3rd floor in Cube 5. I'll take that option every single time. And so I think that, listen, the jury is still out in terms of how this is really going to look. But I think for the first time in a long time, there's at least a glimpse of what it could look like.
I like that cliffhanger. Yeah, in terms of like what will it look like? What's the right mix of uses? I personally got excited when I learned recently about this new Costco design with apartments overhead that they're planning in South LA. I mean, I think this is something that we would have thought it's not feasible or doesn't make sense, right? To have these big box retailers within like office or housing campuses, and now it's making more sense with the hybrid work.
Well, wait a second. I'm curious if the design is one of those massive 250,000 to 1 million square foot warehouses. I think that would probably be a pretty big shift. But big box retail has lived under apartments for quite some time. And I think that goes back to the point of everything that's old is new again. Everything that's new, at one point was old.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's move on to from the tenant's perspective, right? The paradigm shift. What advancements or innovations in amenities and prop tech are being added to office and commercial real estate at large to enhance the tenant's experience?
Yeah, well, I think there's the hard cost, right? So if you were to walk around Fulton Market in Chicago, which has been largely the highest performing submarket in the United States the past 2 years, that is because it is pretty much all new stock, right? It is all brand new assets that are so highly amenitized. It's hard to know. I don't know how people make money. Like there's so much unbelievable amenities in these assets. We just built our Midwest headquarters right there. We took 320 North Sangamon as a brand new Tishman Speyer building. We took 2 floors. It's insane. Again, it's not rocket science. They're building buildings that are highly appealing for someone to work out of. You go there and you go, like the hiring I'm gonna be able to do here, the productivity we're gonna see, the events we can do, the restaurants we can go to, like it adds up to an infinitely better experience then. You want to do a Zoom for 20 minutes tomorrow? No, blow my effing brains out. I want to come see you in the office because it's fucking awesome. It's part of my French. So my point is like, it's kind of become the model. So there's the hard cost of like, what can I build? At the same time, like every other part of our universe, the technology has to follow suit to activate those specific things, which is why we've made the investments we're making. We've spent, it's got to be close to $300 million in the past 2.5 years on this world we've considered tenant experience, right? Which we took that as kind of like tip of the iceberg as to where this probably should go. We've got a massive launch coming in probably 6 or 8 weeks in this exact category. But at the end of the day, you need to have the hard assets, right? The places that people want to go, and they've got to have the appropriate technology to go and activate that new workplace so that all lines of communication, all things are accessible. The experience is really different. So you can have the best car in the world. If you have no key, there's no point. You can't drive it. So similar mindset is where we're really, really focused.
Yeah, I think people never really cared about the office itself as much as commuting to the office. So those new assets, new or old, they better be in good locations that people can access easily, either via public transportation or by car, as in the US. We haven't spoken much about VTS, but I mean, you guys are the largest first-party data source in the industry. You're fueling, investment and asset strategies, leasing and marketing, automation, property operations, and tenant experience. So how does VTS fit in this paradigm shift? What's going to happen with VTS in the next couple of years? Tell us.
Yeah, well, I think we're in a unique spot because, we get almost, there's no crystal ball, but I think we've got probably the closest thing in terms of what's going to happen, right? As you mentioned, like our data is forward looking. It's not a lease comp, which is a lease that got signed probably a year ago, right? We're looking at people who are actively looking for space that are going to transact probably 6 to 12 months from now, as well as active negotiations, right? So not comps, but deals being negotiated. So how are those negotiations changing over time? How are requirement sizes changing? Which kinds of space is really getting activity versus others? So these are all things that we've always wanted to know and never had any insight to. So now doing this 10 years and having the market share we have, that data is really good. And it informs both the things we can help our customers with around strategy, around how to build space, which markets to invest in or not to, but also which products we should be building, right? That's all good data for us internally to use to figure out, all right, this is telling us that the world's going to go here. That's going to put our customers in a good or bad spot. How do we help them? I think looking at that's kind of one lens. The other lens is just like, you can't ignore the macro, right? Like, where are our customers right now? And what are they struggling with? Right? We know that, for example, every single cost hitting an asset really matters. So you better be something that has a very, very clear ROI for them, or you're probably gone. I think where we've been going, and I think, again, we're fortunate to be in this place where our vision was always to make this a platform. It was never to be a portfolio of products. It is one platform that connects all the people in your organization, because silos are very expensive. So forget about the actual technology you're buying. If no one's talking, the opportunities that you miss are super expensive. And so it's about building a platform that largely does help you consolidate some technology. You probably don't need the 20 applications you have. You can do it with 10 because they do the same thing. So it's making sure we're providing the right information, but also the right products that then help kind of activate those teams in a single platform. Because saving money matters, information is probably more critical than ever, and whatever they're using better be pretty much idiot-proof, right? This has to be, there's no directions. You log in, you know what to do.
I like that you highlight the importance of real-time market information and also forward-looking. I think that's super crucial in such uncertain, volatile environments. I also like what you said before regarding the roles of the asset manager, the property manager, and leasing marketing. I mean, they are blurring the lines between those roles, or those roles will get, will unite in terms of their approaches. But I would argue that their roles will become even more important in a time where operational efficiency matters more than ever, where asset appreciation, might not happen for a lot of the office buildings. So crucial that they are empowered with the right tools and the right technology like VTS. Last but not least, Nick, couple of fast ones for you. The future of cities. What's one aspect of your city, New York City, that you wish other cities would adopt?
So, as you know, I love New York City. I think I pretty much everything I have in my life, I probably owe to this city, from this business to my wife, my kids. It's like it's part of me. I think the best part of New York City is the resiliency of the people and what that creates from in like an ecosystem perspective. Like, people love it here, so they want to be out, and it's such a social city. And for me, that is the thing. It's like, it's social because people freaking love it here, right? And that resiliency is like contagious. And I know we're coming out of a pandemic, it's the wrong word to use, but it is. And so, like, I mean, for me, like, I go to places like San Francisco, and like, I'm like, oh, SF is this, like, you see these beautiful towers, and you're like, my first time going there, I called my co-founder Ryan. I'm like, dude, this place is awesome. I'm seeing billboards for software companies, and in New York you don't see that. You see, fashion companies, and which is cool too. But I was like, dude, like, we're starting this tech company. This is so cool. I go downtown at like 9 p.m. It's crickets, and I'm like, this place sucks. Like, you couldn't pay me to live here. Like, but again, that social aspect of, and again, New York is, I understand, it's really the only true 24/7 city in the world, but like, it makes it such a special place, and you fall in love with it so quick that of course you want it to work, right? And you feel get up every day, be like, I got to make this thing work. So I wish other cities had that like appeal, where there was a resilience to the people that was probably driven by the social aspects of that environment. And I know it's a complex answer, but
No, I like the ode to New York City.
Nick, I just want to push back on this a little bit, because we're talking about two cities, New York and San Francisco, which have governments that a lot of our constituents, meaning our limited partners, your customers, have significant agita about. We just do not have a favorable municipal government in place in either city. You could argue that Eric Adams is certainly better than President de Blasio. He kept his promise. He did say, I'm going to stick it to Manhattan, and he did. He did exactly what he said he would do, and when people voted for that. And there's more to New York City than just the borough of Manhattan. So I don't begrudge the voters for choosing that. But when you take someone who is antagonistic to the capitalist base of the city, you're gonna have some significant problems. San Francisco is experiencing that even more so. And then you layer on top of it the fact that you called in. I won't use the word hangover. Let's use the word overhang. Overhang from COVID, and a shifting environment for how people work. The office world, the office market, professional services being the largest economic driver in New York City. It doesn't feel too hopeful at the moment. I agree with you that the spirit of the city is resilient, because if you look, I remember going there when I was a kid in the 90s, pre-Giuliani, when it was just scary. I loved it. I loved the grittiness, the realness of New York City. But now that I'm a father, there's no way I'm raising my kids in New York City right now. And I'm curious how you think about that, and frankly, your constituent, your customer base, where like you're seeing the data. Are they shrinking their footprints? Is it just a function of the office environment, or are they moving to other geographies? We had plenty of companies that moved out of New York to Florida, etc., Texas.
Yeah, but most of that is for tax purposes, not for the cities. I mean, the cities as idea that New York is like all of a sudden highly unsafe. I have two kids here, 8 and 2. They both go to public schools. Like, it's as safe as ever been. Like, I haven't experienced anything, except there was probably like a 6-month period during the worst parts of COVID where it got pretty dicey, right? Because there was nobody outside except for the folks you don't want to see outside. And so that was the only time in 22 years of me being here where I was like, oh, that was weird. Since then, I walk my dog at 2 in the morning. It's every restaurant is packed 24/7. The other weird thing is that while the office buildings might be half full or 3/4 full, the restaurants, you can't get a reservation. It is crazy. So I think that the office market is very different from the larger New York City as a whole, and that's the problem. That's the problem we've got to figure out, right? Is how do you get those people who are comfortable enough to go to the nightclub and the restaurant to go to work on Monday, and so I think that's the next part of this conversation is like, okay, the headwind, clearly we're heading towards a recession. Like most investment banks will tell you it's gonna be official in Q2, Q3 is maybe the bottom. I think that will be the best thing to happen to office in probably 3 years, because there's gonna be winners and losers. And when the winners are the ones who've been in the office, well, guess what? I feel really good saying, I'll see you on Monday, 9 a.m.
I think we'll see a shift there in the power between employers and employees if that scenario comes up. But just to wrap up this, I think that crucial to cities is unlocking the dynamism of remote work, like Nick was saying. And like the cities are the single biggest and densest job center in each of like the top 40 US cities. Like they're the biggest nodes for economic prosperity. The whole country's economy depends on it. So like people that are cheering for offices to go, for cities to go down, or people that are saying that cities are dangerous, just gotta look at the data and then like figure that out. But leaving that aside, whoever's cheering for cities or downtowns to go down, like you don't have to live there to like know that it will impact everyone, each and every one of us. Because if you live in a suburb outside a city, you're benefiting from being outside that city without necessarily paying taxes to that city. I'm looking at you, everyone in New Jersey. But anyway, neither here nor there. Now, last but not least, Nick, what's one aspect, one perspective, one opinion that you've changed your mind about, and how did you go about it?
So I think probably like a lot of CEOs was very much in the mind that if you were not in the office, you just genuinely were not working at all. Like you were playing Nintendo or whatever. I actually now believe it's not true. I think like 1 day a week or something in that line is actually healthy to be home and working, because there is heads down work that is actually effective for people, that when you are being interrupted can be less productive. So I think that's it. While it might seem like a small change, I was like, no, you're not here, you're not working.
Thanks for sharing. We're going to close with 2 quick shout outs. First, want to thank the VTS team and Eric Johnson for producing the VOTI report, the VTS Office Demand Index, which we got some of our data that you listened to in this episode from. Also, shout out to Jeff and his team at Camber Creek. Jeff, I believe you recently announced a little opportunity fund, a little $100 million opportunity fund. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's on top of the $325 million that we just closed on, and what it means is that people are still hungry for innovation in the space. They want to invest in the best companies that are driving transformation of the real estate industry, which we're proud to say that we were an early investor in Nick's company at VTS, and they're one of the leaders in the space. So it's pretty awesome to see.
Nick Romito, founder and CEO at VTS. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
Thanks, everybody. Had a lot of fun.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review Tangent, and share this episode with a friend. This season is edited by Katarina Silva and is produced by me, Edward Cohen. Thanks for listening to Tangent, and remember, collaboration is our superpower, so stay curious and always be learning.